Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
From sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Recover You. Today is Daily Tools to Live a Life in Recovery, Part 2.
Dose 2.
Part 2. So last episode, we talked about some basic beginner tools for getting into recovery, like blockers and the feelings wheel and the faster scale tools to begin identifying and tracking your emotions. And this week, we're going to dig a little bit more into the emotional and prevention side. And we're going to talk about writing yourself what's called a 10-year letter. You could also do a 5-year letter. We'll kind of talk about that. And then also what you can create to support you if you have to travel through recovery. And, if it's for work or maybe even a vacation or, whatever it is. But we're going to talk about these two tools today. So let's start with the 10-year letter.
Okay. So the 10-year letter is essentially you writing a letter back to your present self from 10 years in the future. And what you're trying to do, in essence, is you're trying to do a little bit of vision casting. You're trying to say, hey, in 10 years, after I get through this hard time and go through recovery, this is what my life is going to look like. These are the things that I'm going to achieve. And these are the, it's like taking a wise, healed, seasoned version of yourself coming back in time to stand alongside your present self and say, hey, let me tell you what the next 10 years are going to be like. Mm-hmm. And generally, when people do things like that, they make it positive. They don't be like, hey, well, things are going to get really bad. And so it's a way to, vision cast your life 10 years forward from here.
If you need help with that, you can go to the episode is not numbered actually. It's in between episode 12 and episode 13. So
12.5.
It's called The Best Version of You Meditation. And we dropped that last year. And so you can scroll back in the episodes if you need a little bit of assistance connecting with that version of yourself. We have that meditation there. It's going to help you connect to that future version of you. What do they look like? who are they connected with? What's life like? All those sorts of things.
Right.
So there's another tool. We'll try to put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So it's not, you don't have to be completely healed when you write this. Our journey started, my healing journey started at the end of January 21. I believe I wrote mine in March or April of 21. And so, it was a time for me to deeply reflect on where I was going, what I was going to do for the family, what I was going to do for myself, what I was going to do for maybe, in the future, how I was going to help other people. And so it's a really kind of moving exercise to do and to really go through and articulate what you end up wanting to do. And as I've read it and reread it over the last 3+ years, I'm amazed at how much of the stuff is coming true. So, I talk about, and this is funny. You welcome Kylene to look at your phone and computer. Like, it doesn't bother me anymore. Like, and it did bother me there for a long time. Even though there was nothing on the phone, you'd pick it up and I'd be like, you know what I mean? It was like a weird thing. It doesn't bother me anymore. So that's in there. The one thing I said is you parlayed this testimony into helping others become clean and served as a mentor for others while still working on your own trauma.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a statement. Yeah, it's a statement from 2 months into recovery. And so it's amazing what this 10-year letter can do for you.
Yeah, you're doing that. Yeah, I mean, you just talked in front of church even. That's huge.
Right. So it's amazing, when they talk about goal setting and really kind of charting a course. The nice thing when you set good goals or set a good vision is the vision is what holds you when you're going through hard times. And so whether good organizations do 10-year plans, because it keeps them going. And so this is really, really important for you. And it's really effective. And I would go in and I would take it out and read it. I actually keep it in my emergency kit. We're going to talk about that. But but it's just a really, really powerful exercise. And I've worked with guys who will do this, and with, I think, 99% of the time they break down and cry when they're reading it. And they really feel like the deep emotion when they're reading it out loud.
Well, I would imagine part of that is because one of the core beliefs of an addict is like, I'm not lovable, right? And this letter is essentially an opportunity for them to offer themselves love and self-acceptance. Like, I love you enough that this is going to be our future, right?
Right.
Or like, I'm looking at you from the future and saying, I love you enough to help you get here, or however you want to look at that. But like, it's you reaching out to you and offering you self-acceptance, which isn't that always the answer? Like 99% of the time, like what we're trying to gain externally, if we're compassionate enough with ourselves, it solves the problem. And so this letter is like an opportunity to do that.
I, as you were describing that story, I know one of the most effective things for me during therapy was there was an incident that happened when I was like 11, 12 with my parents. It wasn't anything with my parents. It was just an inappropriate movie that was on, and I was in this situation. I was stuck. I couldn't really go anywhere other than to like sit there and watch the movie, and my parents didn't like rescue me, right? And in therapy, what happened was my therapist, Charles, actually said, you're standing there watching you. What would you do? And I said, hey, come here. I got you. And I rescued myself. And so this is very much like shades of that. You're coming back a much wiser, smarter, healed person, and you're rescuing and holding close the person that you are right now, with all the pain that you've caused and all of the woundedness and the wanting to run and the speeding up behavior and the anxiety and all of these different things. So it's when you can rescue yourself in a whole healing kind of way, that really demonstrates healthy love.
I had a client once that had an EMDR session with another counselor therapist that he was working with, and then came to me and was like, oh my gosh, like I connected to this part, but basically this little part is an asshole. And I'm like, well, like it was not a,
really?
yeah, like, well, let's talk about this. I was like, all of your parts have your best interest at heart.
Right.
So we did another session following that. So it's like EMDR almost like opened up the connection to experience or to identify that version. But then what we did with the emotional processing, as we started asking the questions and trying to gain understanding about why that part exists and what it wants for this person, all this kind of stuff, then it was like, oh my gosh, he started to be able to offer compassion instead of anger towards that part. And so that was like a huge shift, right? Okay, there's this thing or this part that's like really annoying and self-sabotaging and irritating or whatever it is, right? And then I'm going to be mad at that, right? Well, that's fine to identify because there are parts that we're going to resist naturally, right? Like the addict part, you've talked about that. You want to boot it out of the system. We can't do that. So all of the parts have a purpose, and they all care about you, and they all want you to be healthy, and they all want your highest health, really. But they go about it sometimes in unhealthy, almost, well, and I would say truly childlike ways, because often the parts that act out are stuck in childhood where they didn't have complete understanding of the world, and they didn't have complete understanding of what was happening, and they didn't have healthy coping mechanisms, right? So then as an adult, and what we get to do is go back and look at that version, look at that coping mechanism, look at that part, look at whatever it is, and do exactly what you did, is like, well, that just needed love, right? Now yours wasn't an acting out part, it was a wounded part, but same thing. Every single part deserves compassion. It's there for a reason. And so some of them need support, some of them need empowerment, some of them need love, some of them need, whatever. So, but it's always coming from that place of compassion. So I've seen this, with my clients and with you and all these different experiences where that is transformational. So like writing this letter is almost like a conscious, the letter is definitely, I think, maybe a mix, right? It's like a conscious and unconscious thing. Because sometimes when you start writing, you end up in a flow, and that's sort of flowing from your subconscious a little bit as well. But I think it's a little bit of a mix of your conscious and your subconscious kind of showing you what your future can be like and giving you that opportunity to offer compassion to your current self who isn't there yet.
Yeah, I often think, a lot of times what many of us have either never received, or maybe because of our woundedness, we didn't recognize that it was there, was somebody saying, I believe in you. You can do this. You're going to do it. The 10-year letter makes that person you, who comes in and says, I believe in you. You're going to do this. I have complete faith in you. And so, yeah, it's a really, you're right. It mixes the subconscious and the conscious together. But when you're in a group of men who are all reading the 10-year letter, the I know I get moved to tears listening to other folks tell theirs. And so one of the questions I always ask right after somebody reads it is, how do you feel? What emotions are you feeling? And then I ask the other men, what emotion are you feeling in listening to that?
Well, that's the power of group, I think, because the letter itself brings the opportunity for you to accept you, for you to extend the hand to you, all this kind of stuff. But when you have a group doing it together, now you get to experience the validation and the acceptance and the love and the compassion from other people in the room.
Right.
And it makes it easier for you to accept, because when you see them read their letter, you have so much compassion on them.
Right.
Someone who's probably done the same things you've done.
Absolutely.
So a couple questions to get you kind of started thinking about how to write your letter. So first of all, you're writing it from a future perspective, like we said, but then to kind of get your thoughts flowing, what feels good about recovery? So after 10 years in sobriety or 10 years in recovery, what feels good about your life? What's different? What's changed? How has your life changed? Like, what's happening in your life? Are your activities different? Are your thoughts different? Are your feelings different? Are you not married now and you're married then? Are you married now and things are disastrous after discovery, and in 10 years things are really good? Like, what does that look like? How has your life changed? If you're struggling when you're reading this letter, because the whole point of writing this letter is that current you can read it when you need some motivation. So what would current you, if you're struggling, need to hear about why you should stay the course, why you should stay sober? What's the motivation there for you? What is important to you? What are your values? What are your beliefs around this? What are you hoping for? And what is future self going to tell you about the benefit of staying the course? So those are a couple things to kind of just get you started there.
Yeah, very, very effective tool. Very, very effective tool.
Cool. Okay. So then you take that 10-year letter and you fold it up.
Yep.
And you put it in
your emergency kit.
Emergency kit.
Yeah. So
I love this thing, by the way. I think it's so cool.
Yeah. The emergency kit is here. I'm gonna see if I can make noises of me dumping everything.
Oh, good.
That's everything coming out of my emergency kit. So if you think about what compulsive behavior is, it's very limbic in nature. And I'm talking about the limbic system in the brain. So what it's doing is your limbic system is taking over and it's driving you down a road to compulsive behavior that you don't really want to. Your prefrontal cortex has no control over. It's lost control. So what the emergency kit is, it's essentially a bag or a box or something that you can carry that has tangible things that you can touch, feel, and see. So these are activating your limbic system. So what this does is these are tokens of maybe something that you've done and you've accomplished over the years, something that reminds you of good things, something that reminds you of something that you want to live into. So maybe pictures of you and your family. The family that maybe you've hurt, you put pictures in there. Maybe it's an accomplishment. So I have a medal from one of the long distance runs that I did. So that was a very important accomplishment for me. That's what was hitting the table.
A couple metal things.
Yeah, I have a couple metal things. So I have that. I have this. It's a compass that you got me with a Bible verse in it. So that's in there. And so that's in there. What else is in there? My 2-year coin is in there as well. And then I keep pictures in there, and I also keep, there's actually a couple other letters that I wrote that I keep in there as well. So it's the way I use this system. So the first time we talked, you had mentioned travel at the beginning of it. So the first time that travel happened was when you traveled away from here. So the first time I used it was I spread it out on the vanity of my in our bathroom. So everything was spread out there. The medals, the pictures were all spread out so I could see them. The letters were laid out and everything like that. So that was the first time I used it. So it was out those 5-6 days that you were gone. Once I started traveling for work or for just leisure to go see Keegan at West Point by myself or whatever, then I would take it with me. I always take it with me. I did forget this last trip, but I always.
It was gone, and I was like, "Hey, your emergency kit was like next to the laundry."
Yeah, right. So, but I always take it with me, and uh, it's an opportunity for me to reach in there and feel things that matter if for whatever reason something comes up. So it's another tangible reminder of what you're working towards, what you're doing all the work towards.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different ways that you can use this, right? So, you mentioned at home if one of you is gone or on vacation or travel or whatever. More specifically, like if there's a location in the house that's a particular acting out point, maybe for a while you lay it out there so that it's a visual pattern interrupt of like you walk in and you're like, oh, I see things I care about, right? I've only worked with one addict at like through a coaching capacity, and he had other people on his team as well. But I actually recommended that he like do this, right? And the particular scenario is that they were separated at the time, and so it can also be a really great situation. Like, hey, your spouse like isn't in the house with you. You're living in an apartment, or you're living in a hotel for a little while, or you have your own house, or whatever it is. But you guys are separated. Just put it out in your house. Like, if this is something that's going to be helpful for you, if you're struggling, put it in, maybe make a couple copies of it, put it in.
Yeah.
If there's multiple places that you act out, right? Maybe make a version for home and a version for travel, or whatever you think is going to be most helpful. But take some time and put some effort into this so that it is actually deeply meaningful to you. All of these things that we're giving you are just tools. They're not the end all be all to total recovery and healing. And we're going to kind of, keep giving these things. But for some people, this can be incredibly impactful, right? And even just what we've kind of talked about, like in the last episode with the train tracks, when you're thinking about the patterns in your brain, pattern interrupt is what you're looking for. To change and to create a new pattern. If you're really used to going one direction, you just want to constantly interrupt that. And so things like this, where you have a visual or you have something you can touch or you have something you can read and remind yourself, or a picture that really deeply motivates you, right? Those can all be things that can be really helpful. So lots of different ways to use that. We typically think it's really great for travel, but again, maybe you're just sleeping in the guest room and you need to put it on the nightstand,
right.
Or maybe you need to put it in the bathroom of the guest room.
And it's interesting you said that, because I do remember when I was sleeping downstairs in the room, for the first so many months, I did have some tokens that I had put up on the vanity down there that I just kept down there, and they were just reminders of something I wanted to be and something that I had accomplished, and so it was all positive experiences that I wanted to live into.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about this a whole lot, but I think you mentioned having the 2-year coin in there.
Mm-hmm.
So as you hit milestones, no matter how small they are, make sure you're having some sort of positive reward system in place.
Right.
So even if you have to get yourself your own sobriety token,
Yeah.
or if there's some sort of thing that's motivating, like going to a restaurant with a friend, and usually that's a special occasion, but you've hit 90 days and you want to do that, right? Have some sort of reward system that's motivating to you in place. And I like the token thing because it's just such a good visual reminder, and it's something tangible. You can carry it in your pocket. There's one, like I've gotten Patrick ones off of Etsy. So they're not like AA tokens, they're just sobriety tokens. So they'll have different images on them, and they'll have, you can say 90 days or 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever. And they're really, really cool. So there's a visual aspect that's really cool to it. Some of them you can order with a hole in it if you want to keep it on a keychain, or if you feel confident just letting it float around in your pocket. Some people like to have things that they can reach in and touch as a reminder, right? Like a rock or a token would be a great thing. So any of those things can be really helpful. But if you have the positive reinforcement even if it's just from you for a while, because we know how rough the first 6 months, even the first year can be, even if you're doing everything absolutely right. But there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of difficulty. So if you can give yourself positive reinforcement through this process, that's a good dopamine hit. That's a good reward. That's something we want to really establish that this is positive in the brain, and we want to push that reward system.
Right.
And then when you have something like the emergency kit and the 10-year letter, it's you loving you, it's you accepting you, it's you showing yourself that you believe that you're worthy. And then all of these things together, maybe you have the token and a picture and the letter and all these other things in the kit. And then whenever you're struggling, maybe you don't have it laid out, but if you're struggling, you know that this is one of the tools that you can always lean on.
Yeah. So it's been really good for me. I know the some of the hotels I stayed in when I was really at various moments when I've traveled quite a bit through the time, I'll set it up on the ottoman. So it's like right there. I'll set it up at the end of the table, and so it's really nice to kind of see those pictures. And I actually was thinking I need to upgrade the pictures, because the pictures that I have in there are from what I gathered 3.5 years ago, and so we're in a different spot now. So to me, that's actually been moving me recently. Like, I need to put some new pictures in there, and kind of an indicator of where we are, because it's a little bit more of a reward system as well. But very, very effective tool. And I've seen some folks use a box. I've seen some folks use just a standard envelope. I actually went and bought a little leather zip pouch because it kind of lended a little bit more credence to it, and it was easier to spot and travel and things like that.
It's like a good size to throw in your suitcase. It's a little bit flexible.
Right.
It can hold everything that you want in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So get that, again, whatever it is for you. If it's going to be a travel case for you, make sure you get a container that can travel, right? The box might not be effective for that. If you're doing multiple, one to travel, one for home, maybe a really cool box. It's like decorative. It's like perfect for home, right? And it's very symbolic, and, maybe it has something engraved on it, right? So make it special for you. Make it mean something to you. Make it really, really cool and impactful for you. And then you're going to be more likely to use it.
Right.
All right, so that wraps up Daily Tools to Live a Life in Recovery Part 2. We hope this is helpful. We would always love to hear from you. Are these helpful? Have you used these? Are you using these? I know that these are things that you can do at home, but we do always encourage that you do them in community as well. So whenever that is possible. But again, these are things that everyone can do. So even if, I know that there are people live in different places where these support groups just are not available locally. We get that. These are still things that you can do by yourself and still gain that benefit from. So we hope that this is encouraging, and we will talk to you in the next episode about 2 more simple tools that you can use on a regular basis to help you continue moving towards recovery. See you then. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.